Welcome back. We start our news bulletin from Brazil, where 904 more people have died from COVID-19 as the death toll neared 36,000. The US has recorded 749 deaths overnight, taking the tally to over 109,000. Worldwide, the death count has crossed 399,000 with more than 6.8 million infected. Further details in this report.
While the world is still reopening a huge number of cases on a daily basis, the WHO says the second wave of COVID-19 is not a matter of if, but when. Brazil has removed months of data on its outbreak from public view as President Jair Bolsonaro defended delays and changes to official record keeping. The president, however, accused the World Health Organization of being biased.
The WHO backed down. Trump cut money to them, and they went back on everything. There was only one guy missing, and he's not even a doctor. I am moving forward on this. The United States left the WHO, and we are studying this for the future. Either the WHO works with ideological impartiality, or we are also out. We don't need outsiders weighing in on health here.
Over in Asia, Indonesia and India have reported record high cases over the past 24 hours. But Sri Lanka says it will open to international tourists from 1st August after a successful containment of the coronavirus. In China, experts says the citywide nucleic acid testing conducted in Wuhan is conducive to its future epidemic prevention and control.
We have found all the asymptomatic cases and other potential risks at this point. This will reduce the pressure for our future prevention and control work.
South Korea has reported 57 additional cases of the coronavirus, making the second day in a row that its daily count is above 50.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported a record overnight surge in COVID-19 cases for the 5th straight day, as the country's death toll tops 2,000. Over the past 24 hours, 67 people lost their lives, while nearly 5,000 tested positive for the virus. The Ministry of Health says the death toll stands at 2,002 with nearly 99,000 cases. It said over 33,000 patients of coronavirus have recovered so far. Moving on to the US, which has welcomed the Cairo Declaration to resolve the Libyan crisis and end armed conflict in the country. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi says this initiative includes a ceasefire and will pave the way for elections in Libya. More in this report.
As his Libyan National Army faces massive losses to the Turkey-backed GNA forces, General Khalifa Haftar flew to Cairo for support. Al-Sisi backed his ally, announcing the Cairo Declaration to end the years-long civil war in Libya.
I would like to point out that this initiative calls for respect for all efforts and other international and United Nations initiative by announcing a ceasefire starting 6 a.m. on June 8, 2020. The initiative also obliges all foreign sides to exit all foreign fighters from all over Libyan land, dismantling all militias and withdrawing their weapons.
The UN says it wants all sides to participate in good faith to halt the fighting and return to the UN-led political negotiations. Al-Sisi also urged international support for the initiative and called on United Nations to invite Libya's rival administration for talks. He said repercussions of conflict are not limited to Libya but spreading to neighboring countries as well. Haftar too warned against the regional and global repercussions of foreign intervention.
The state of internal polarization by supporting the unconstitutional government of national accord with more weapons and fighters. It also deepens the state of international and regional polarization around Libya in light of the conflicting interests among most of the countries involved in this conflict.
Russia, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Bahrain have backed the Cairo Declaration. Libya's government of national accord is yet to comment on the development.
In a related development, Turkey has slammed allegations leveled by Egypt against Ankara regarding Libya. The Foreign Office said the accusations were leveled in the meeting of foreign ministers of Global Coalition to Defeat Terrorism. It's a Turkish Deputy Foreign Minister, Sedat Önal, gave a necessary response to the Egyptian Foreign Minister. Spokesperson Hami Aksoy said warlord Khalifa Haftar and his allies, including the Egyptian administration, are the real obstacles to peace in Libya. He said Haftar's forces made many attempts to overthrow the legitimate government and establish an authoritarian regime. Aksoy added that Egypt's years-long military support to Haftar constitutes a clear violation of UN Security Council resolutions. 26 people, including the chief of a Fulani village, have been killed in an attack in the volatile Mopti region in central Mali. Officials say men in military attire also burned down Benedama village. In a statement, the Fulani Association, Tabit al-Pulaku, blamed the attack on Mali soldiers. It said troops surrounded the village in pickup trucks before killing the villagers and setting houses on fire. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack yet. Human rights groups have also accused Mali's military in the past of conducting extrajudicial killings, kidnappings, torture, and arbitrary arrests. Protests over the custodial killing of George Floyd continue across the U.S. for the 12th consecutive day, while tens of thousands gathered for the biggest ever demonstration in Washington, D.C. Over in San Francisco, protesters blocked the iconic Golden Gate Bridge. Racial justice campaigners also took to streets in Miami, Philadelphia, and New York. For the past 12 days, the long-standing problem of systemic racism and mistreatment of African Americans and other minorities has taken center stage in the U.S. At the second memorial service in Floyd's hometown in North Carolina, his family members called for an end to police brutality and racism. The incident has also sparked protests across the world as thousands took to streets across Europe, Australia, Japan, and South Korea. Meanwhile, the U.S. prosecutors have charged for the two Buffalo police officers seen shoving an elderly protester in a graphic video earlier this week. Erie County District Attorney John Flynn announced that officers Robert McCabe and Aaron Drogasky are facing one count each of second-degree assault. Both officers have pleaded not guilty. All 57 members of their unit had resigned in protest after the two officers were suspended without pay and sought reassignment. In the video, the officers appear to push and injure Martin Guerno, 75, outside of City Hall as their fellow officers walk past. In a related story, the U.S. has accused China of using the death of George Floyd to justify denying its own people basic human rights. In a statement, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Beijing's laughable propaganda will not fool anyone. Pompeo said the Chinese Communist Party was continuing its contempt for the truth and law to serve its lust for power. Pompeo's remarks come after Beijing's scathing criticism of Washington over the Floyd case. Earlier, Beijing accused the U.S. of hypocrisy over anti-racism protests after Washington's criticism of Beijing's new security laws for Hong Kong. Moscow has warned for tit-for-tat measures in response to the Czech Republic's expulsion of two Russian diplomats. In a briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said the step is another attempt to compromise bilateral relations. Zakharova said Russia sees the Czech Republic's action as an unfriendly and indecent step. She said over recent years, Moscow had been developing relations with Prague in the humanitarian, economic, and political fields, but Prague has deliberately delivered a blow to the Russian-Czech cooperation. Thousands of Lebanese have come out to the main square in Beirut to protest against the slow pace of reforms in the crisis-hit country. The demonstration devolved into clashes after police fired tear gas at rock-throwing protesters. Protesters set fires on main roads and at one point destroyed police motorbikes and set one alight. The Lebanese Red Cross said 37 protesters had been injured, of which 11 were taken to hospitals for treatment. Demonstrations have been taking place in Lebanon since October, demanding solution to the ailing economy and an end to rampant corruption.
We have been protesting daily. We have sit-ins on the streets, in front of the Justice Palace, in front of the Ministry of Finance and the Economy. Our problems have yet to be solved, and we have promises, the Prime Minister claims. 97% of the government's pledges have been carried out, but we have not seen even 1% on the ground.
We're now taking a short break, but stay tuned for more news. Welcome back. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says lasting peace and stability in Afghanistan is vital for regional development. The statement follows the appointment of Pakistan's Special Envoy to Afghanistan, Mohammad Sadiq. Qureshi said an experienced diplomat like Sadiq will bolster Pak-Afghan relations. The Foreign Minister also discussed policy guidelines on the Afghan peace process with Sadiq. Ambassador Sadiq earlier served as Pakistan's envoy to Kabul from 2008 to 2014. He also served as spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and held key diplomatic posts in Beijing, Brussels, and Washington. China has advised its citizens not to travel to Australia amid an increase in anti-Chinese sentiment caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. In a statement, the Ministry of Culture and Tourism said there has been a sudden rise in violence against Chinese citizens in the country. The ministry reminded Chinese tourists to take appropriate safety precautions. However, the Australian government has refuted the charges. Canberra said millions of tourists expressed their confidence in Australia as a safe and welcoming destination by visiting each year. In April, the Australian Human Rights Commission said 1 in 4 people who lodged racial discrimination complaints said they were targeted due to COVID-19. In Mozambique, 13 people have died after a sailboat carrying 50 sank in bad weather off the coast of northern Cabo Delgado province. Police said they are recovering the bodies of victims as well as 35 survivors who are being held for further investigation. The shipwreck occurred south of Pemba, where militants have been waging an insurgency for over 2 years. The UN estimates more than 200,000 people in the province have been displaced by the insurgency. The World Bank has warned the COVID-19 pandemic will affect the livelihoods of billions of people across the world. In an interview, Bank President David Malpass says economic fallout of the pandemic can last for a decade. Malpass said over 60 million people can find themselves with about $1 per day to live on. He said the main challenges are the damage to global trade and inclinations to bring supply chains closer to home or erect trade barriers. He said the global economy will become less interconnected after the pandemic, which will create its own set of tensions and inequality. In Syria, children have become a picture of misery, as most of them are either killed, displaced, tortured, or injured and disabled. This is the miserable plight of Syrian children who bear the brunt of war. The dilemma of Syrian children in this report.
The war is taking its toll on Syrian children. Their lives forever may have been marked by the conflict. The war is in its 10th year. Half of the country's children have only ever known war. Prolonged exposure to war, stress, and uncertainty has left many children in a state of toxic stress. According to UN aid agency, over the past week, violence has forced 6,500 children to flee every day. Children are either killed, displaced, tortured, or injured and disabled. Thousands have been killed, while millions of others had to leave the country with their families. Many other children have to go on living with these injuries.
My daughter has burns on her face and other parts of her body. What is her crime? Somebody should tell me what her offense is. My daughter lost her future.
The annual observance has recalled that children pay the price of the civil war in Syria. One of the disabled kids of the war is an 8-year-old boy, Abdurrahman Davud. His father had died in an airstrike 5 years ago. He wants to go back to his village.
My father died in an air attack. I would like to go back to my village and school, and I want to play games.
The crisis in northwest Syria is turning into a child protection crisis of unprecedented scale. According to the report, at least 29,296 children have been killed in Syria, while many others have been injured or disabled.
The regime's airstrike hit my husband and son when they were in the shop. My son lost his arm. He had much suffering in the beginning, now he is better, but I'm still in pain when he falls down. My son became fatherless when he was only 2.5 years old. What is his crime?
Or disabled. The vulnerable children are recruited in wars. Their schools are attacked, they are exploited, abducted, and killed. The Syrian regime has been behind the majorities of the fatalities, tortures, injuries, and destroyed futures of millions of children.
The Kremlin says the OPEC Plus agreements will have a positive impact on future stabilization of the global energy markets. This comes as OPEC, Russia and allies agreed to extend a cut of nearly 10 million barrels of oil a day through the end of July to boost prices. Talking to the media, Energy Minister Alexander Novak said Russia will produce 510 million to 520 million tons of crude in 2020. The OPEC ministers have bound non-compliant members to make extra reductions in July to September period. The Joint Ministerial Monitoring Committee of the group will now meet every month until December to review the market. Benchmark Brent crude climbed to a 3-month high on Friday, above $42 a barrel. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.